What is up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and these are my favorite metalcore albums of 2021 so far. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. First up, we have Pupil Slicer with Mirrors. This is a UK mathcore band, so more in the vein of things like Converge, the Dillinger Escape Plan, or if you want something a little bit more recent, Frontierer crowd.
I'm a math-magician.
This is very chaotic, abrasive music, like challenging technical riffs, very intense. They do also slow it down sometimes and get a little bit more melodic, a little bit more kind of like screamo even in cases. But for the most part, I enjoy the faster, more dissonant tracks on this album. And in addition to the great guitars and the great drums, there's also a really sick bass tone, especially on L'Appel du Vide. This is also my personal favorite song on the album. That intro just kills. I played it at the top and it will absolutely destroy you. But I'm also partial to Stabbing Spiders, Panic Defense, Vilified, and Worthless. So yeah, if you're looking for something more on the mathcore side of things, a little bit more technical, a little bit more crazy, then Pupil Slicer is definitely the way to go. Alright, next up we have Erra with their self-titled album. Erra is kind of like a gentler Under Oath is the way I would put it. They've got a good balance between the clean vocals and the harsh vocals. But again, on top of these gentler, sometimes even proggier riffs, and they're sick, of course. Like, the guitars are definitely the star of the show for me when it comes to this band. I especially dig the opening of House of Glass. This is a very Architects-y sounding song. But then they do some weirder stuff too and go in their own directions, which I respect because, you know, you got to stand out. You got to develop your own personality, your own niche.
This is your opportunity
for you. I don't want your life.
So they're doing things like this almost like Daft Punk vocal effect on the intensely uplifting Lunar Halo. There's also a very nice lengthy solo on Remnant, which has some just great vibes to it. I just want to like move my body along, kind of like an Animals as Leaders meets Coheed and Cambria kind of thing. Personal favorite tracks on this one, Snowblood, Electric Twilight, and Divisionary. Alright, then we have the newest album on this particular list. It's Ghost Iris with Comatose. This is actually a Denmark band that I would highly recommend to fans of bands like Textures. Man, I miss those guys. Another great mix here of harsh and melodic, but on a wider spectrum, I would say. The harsh parts can get super heavy, like borderlining on deathcore, and then the soft parts get very catchy, albeit sometimes a little bit cliche with the lyrics. A lot of doom and gloom on these otherwise uplifting songs. But yeah, as for those more intense deathcore flavored areas, you've got the opening track, Former Self, parts of Coda as well. That last one also gets a little bit loathy. Paper Tiger has a crushing opening riff and bass grumble. And there's a nice little blech on Power Schism too. And speaking of Animals as Leaders illusions, Cult is another one that has that sort of proggy, jazzier vibe to it. A little bit of Periphery on here too. Overall, this is a very consistent album. There's a few down moments, but really no filler songs overall. Every single one of them has something to offer. Then we have Capra with In Transmission. This is a Louisiana band that kind of leans a little bit more into the hardcore spectrum, especially with the sort of Minor Threat influence sounding vocals. A little bit of mathcore here too, because the riffs are pure Every Time I Die. I've talked about this band a few times already, and that's because I love them. I love this album. I have an interview with the band as well. Check it out. I have a full review of this album. Check it out. But it's just a fun balance of really like party time, get down, throw your fist in the air kind of riffs with more like potent, powerful topics, very passionate, genuine vocals. Crow definitely has this magnetism to her style. They're a band that's just so real, I guess is the way that I would put it, and also just very fun at the same time. Again, that interesting balance. But yeah, favorite tracks on this album, Torture Ship. That intro still gets me every time. The Locust Preacher, Medusa is a total rager, and then Paper Tongues as well. So I thought I was done with this thing, but then I got to hear Mouthbreather and their new album, I'm Sorry, Mr. Salesman. Holy shit, this thing fucks. This is a Boston band. I previously covered their other two EPs, Pig and Dollmeat, back in 2018. But they have come such a far way from that on this album. Like before, they were kind of like really chaotic, a little bit grindy, sort of more what I would call like math grind. But on this new one, they've taken that and then rolled it more into this kind of groove-oriented metallic hardcore sound. Think bands like Vane, Knock Loose, and Code Orange. Don't bring me back. Don't bring me back. Don't bring me back. Don't you run away from me. So these chunky beatdown parts and these scream-along vocals, but then also mixing in these mathcore guitars in certain areas that are fantastic. There's parts in the album I described as like 43% burnt. The drumming's fantastic. The bass tone is absolutely ridiculous. It's fucking raunchy. Just bursting with killer moments. Lots of different paces and approaches, a little bit of experimentation in certain places too. Favorite tracks on here, Wasted Science, Cotton Shot. Also I Leave, which has a fantastic tapping guitar in the intro. Must listen, and honestly, it may be my favorite of this whole group now. I also got a chance to listen to Funeral Psalms from The Undertaking via Solid State Records. This is a San Diego band, once more recommended for fans of Every Time I Die. Definitely more of their kind of chaotic side, the faster D-beat driven stuff. More fantastic riffs as to be expected. Just a great energy too. Nostalgia Can Be a Nasty Beast in particular is an absolute rager. And then also more like sing-songy melodic tracks like Plague, which have kind of this like weird Norma Jean vibe. It's sort of their own twist on it, but that was the thing that kept popping into my mind. Take Me Down to the River has this kind of August Burns Red sounding solo on it, so a lot of different things coming together that I really enjoyed on this thing. I'm hoping to spend a little bit more time with it. I haven't listened to it quite as many times as some of the other albums on this list, but favorite tracks so far, definitely No Friends and Nostalgia Can Be a Nasty Beast. Alright then, last but certainly not least, we have Zao with the Crimson Corridor. Now we're kind of changing pace here because this is a much darker album. These guys are a legendary but often kind of ignored band. I said this in my favorite albums of April list that, you know, these metalcore bands that came up in the 90s, you hear a lot of respect for some of them, but Zao was right there in the mix and they just don't get brought up as often.
I led thousands of men into battle with everything from horses and swords to artillery and tanks.
In any case, these guys are still putting out some of their best material to date. Like I said, this is a dark, raw, more old school take on the genre. Much more intense, there's very few like bells and whistles, there's more attention to songwriting, there's definitely some flourishes here with the very mathy drums and guitars, there's some play with time signatures on this thing, but overall it's this dreary thing with vocals that I describe as almost blackened. There are even some doomier parts here, and the mix in particular I've more recently started to compare to newer groups like Barishi, but then there's also these banger prog riffs that almost sound like Gojira at times. Personal favorite tracks on this one: Ship of Theseus, The Final Ghost, Transitions, and Lost Star. Stick around, I got plenty more videos coming right after this one. More album reviews, lists, tier lists, interviews with bands on the podcast, you name it, we've got it, so plenty of reasons to subscribe if you have not already. You can also chat with us on Discord and support on Patreon. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.